disciple whom Jesus loved who did that. So we kind of put the two together. It's not that difficult. But more than that, we have some other evidence as well. A man named Polycarp was a disciple of John's. So Jesus had 12 disciples, and John was one of them. And then each of those disciples were to go out and make disciples. So they had other disciples that they were making under them. One of the disciples, one of the followers, one of the proteges of John was a man named Polycarp. Polycarp gave a speech and talked to some other people, and one of these other people said that Polycarp told him, so this is third person, right? Polycarp told me that Jesus told him, or John told him, that he wrote this letter, the gospel, while he was in Ephesus. Now, if you think about the church of Ephesus, you guys know how this church started. Back in the 60s, when we started this church, and you know some of the ministers were. Think of the church in Ephesus. Paul started the church in Ephesus. And after a few years there, he left and put Timothy in charge. So we have the book of Timothy, 1st and 2nd Timothy, written to Timothy while he was the minister, if you would, at the church in Ephesus. After Timothy was there for a while, their minister was John the Apostle. Now, can you imagine the heritage of that church? Paul started this, Timothy was a minister for a while, and then the Apostle John was. That's a pretty good start for a church. But it was during that time when John was at Ephesus that they think that he wrote this gospel as a means of saying, or passing on to other people, the testimony of Jesus. We know that in the early churches, they dedicated themselves to the apostles' teaching. So the apostles would go around and say, well, here's what Jesus told us, and here's what Jesus did. And John did that too. But then he thought, I'm not going to live forever. Maybe I should write some of this down so that other people can teach it after I'm gone. And so it's believed, in fact, depending on the scholar you read, but I tend to believe, he wrote most of the Gospel of John as we have it for his church there. And then we're going to find a few parts that I think were added later when he started expanding this to other churches as well. And so you see a little bit of different audience in certain places in there. And I think some of those are additions that he brought later. For example, there are places where he'll say something in Aramaic, he'll give you the Aramaic term, instead of writing in Greek. All of the written language at that time usually was Greek, but the Jewish people, the Hebrews, spoke in a language called Aramaic. And every now and then he'll introduce an Aramaic term. And I think when he first wrote this gospel, he just left it that way. And then later he started sending it to people who didn't speak Aramaic, and so he'd explain those terms. So as you read through here, you'll find little parenthetical phrases where he'll say, Jesus was the Messiah. And they'll say, that is the Christ. Because Messiah is the Aramaic term, and Christ is the Greek term. So I think there was something he did later on there to kind of add that. So, tradition is, again, that John probably wrote this from Ephesus, probably in the late 1st century. It was probably intended for a Jewish audience and then expanded it to others. And one of the things I think he was addressing, because later on, not when he probably wrote this the first time, but later on, this idea of Gnosticism came up. Gnosticism is a religious view, and I told you about this before, where people think that the spiritual matters, it's good, the physical doesn't matter, it's evil. So whatever I do in my flesh doesn't matter. What matters is what goes on in my spirit. So as long as I love God, I can go out and have sex with whoever I want and get drunk and do all kinds of stupid stuff with my body. And I think John wants to address this and say, all right, first of all, Jesus was spiritual. So we're going to establish his deity to start. And then the transitional verse is verse 14 of chapter 1 where it says, and the Word became flesh. And so he's saying deity became flesh. It's not that the spiritual is good and the flesh is evil. You've got to consider what you do in your body as part of your spiritual nature. The spiritual and the flesh go together. And so I believe, and you don't have to, but I think this first 14 or 18 verses of John, the prologue as we call it, was added later. I don't think he wrote that originally for his church. I think he added this later for the Gnostics that we're going to be reading this, if that makes sense. But I think John wrote it all. I just think he did it at different times and then added it all together. All right, so here we go. John chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning, and through him all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in darkness, and darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God, his name was John, not the writer, this would be John the Baptist. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself is not the light. He only came as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision, nor husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace. Well, that's how John starts, and we're going to expand on this a little bit more next week. But the key word in the Gospel of John, and you don't see it so much here, but a little bit, he introduces this idea. The word believe. It's the Greek verb pistuo. And he uses it 98 times in this book. Now, there is a noun form of the word called just pistis, and that does not occur in the book anywhere. He only uses the verb, not the noun. I think John's trying to say your belief is something active. It's not passive. It's not something you believe in your head. It's something you believe in your heart that affects the way that you act and treat others. And so I think that's one of the key things in the book of John. The whole purpose of his book that he explains in chapter 20, verse 31, he says, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written, why? That you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing, you may have life in his name. That's the theme of the book, that you would believe in Jesus Christ as the Messiah, the Son of God. And that by believing, you would have eternal life in his name. Now, the Gospel of John is different than the other three Gospels. John doesn't cover all of the stuff that the other Gospels cover. He doesn't ever explain the genealogy of Jesus. Who were his parents? Who were his grandparents? What came from the line of David? He doesn't explain any of that. He doesn't talk about his birth. There's no story about the wise men or the shepherds. Yeah, John skips all of that. John doesn't even talk about Jesus' baptism. He doesn't talk about Jesus being tempted by the devil in the wilderness. He doesn't talk about Jesus casting out demons. He doesn't talk about most of Jesus' parables. He doesn't include the transfiguration, even though he was there. He does not include the instituting of the Last Supper. When we get to that part, you'll find that he skips over to the actual supper part and just gets into some of the teachings of Jesus. He skips over the part of Jesus praying in Gethsemane. He gets right to the crucifixion. He doesn't talk about Jesus' ascension into heaven. Those kinds of things are covered in the other Gospels, and John skips all that stuff. John focuses more on Jesus' ministry in Jerusalem. Oddly, like Mark focuses on Jesus' ministry in Galilee. And they don't talk a whole lot about Jerusalem. But John focuses a lot on Jesus' ministry there in Jerusalem. He talks about all the feasts that Jesus went to Jerusalem to celebrate with everybody else. John also includes some personal conversations that Jesus had that nobody else includes. What did Jesus say to Nicodemus? Well, we'll find that out from John. What did he say when he was before Pilate? We're going to find that out from John. What did he say in his prayer to God before his crucifixion? Well, John tells us those things. So he includes a lot of the personal conversations that Jesus had, not just the teachings to the masses, like the other Gospels do. Another notable thing that John includes that the others miss is these I am statements. 7 times Jesus says, I am. He says, I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the gate for the sheep. I'm the good shepherd. I'm the resurrection and the life. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. I'm the true vine. We don't have any of those in the other Gospels, but here Jesus says, here's who I am. Let me explain it to you. And you know why he won't explain it? As John said, was so that you could believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of the living God, and that by having faith in him, you might have eternal life. So it's an outline of the book. Here's the main sections, the prologue, the first 18 verses. And again, I say this was added later. You can disagree with me, and I believe you. But the prologue sets forth the theological introduction. It enables us to understand the words and deeds of Jesus are actually the words and deeds of God. It talks about the deity of Christ. This wasn't a great teacher. This wasn't a rabbi that walked around and taught great things and had great followings and even performed miracles. This was God, the Word made flesh. Second part, the rest of the first chapter through the 12th chapter is what many call the book of signs. It's where he does all the miracles. There are 7 miracles that he talks about in here. Some of those got him in trouble because he did them on the wrong day. And so we're talking about some of the miracles that he did. And then chapters 13 to 17 is the time that he spent with his disciples getting them ready for his crucifixion. They call it his farewell. It's his time to say, here's the stuff that's really important I want you guys to take note of. Preparing them for his death. Preparing them for what they're going to have to do on his behalf after he's gone. And then in chapter 18, we get the trial and the crucifixion and the resurrection. And then in chapter 21, there's what we call an epilogue. And again, I think this was added on later, but it's the idea, it completes the gospel by showing the plans of the Lord after the resurrection. What happened next? What happened to Peter? What happened to John, the disciple of Jesus left? What happened after the resurrection that made them ready to go out and share the good news with everybody else? So in 21 chapters, John tells us the story of Jesus. Now, if you took all the words that Jesus spoke in John, and in Matthew, and in Mark, and in Luke, and just put them all together, just read them, it's been estimated it takes about 3 hours to read just the words of Jesus. Now, his ministry took 3 years. If I try to condense the last 3 years of your life down to 3 hours, how thorough would that be? Well, not very. Obviously, we get a very small snapshot of what Jesus did and taught. But it's enough. John tells us this in chapter 21, verse 25. He says, Jesus did many other things as well. We've kind of assumed that. If every one of them were written down, I suppose that even the whole world would not have room for the books that would be written. And if you've ever gone to the bookstore, and you've looked at the number of books that are written as commentaries to what the Bible says, you kind of get a feel for what he's talking about. There's a lot of books out there that people write about what Jesus said and how to interpret it. And that's just based on the stuff we have, let alone the other 2 years, 11 months, 364 days, and 21 hours. All of that stuff that Jesus did and taught that we're missing out on. Would you love to know some of that? But John says this is enough. You can't hear it all, but this is enough that you can believe that he is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing in him, you can have eternal life. Now, when we get back, as we read in the first part of John, we said that John didn't include the birth of Jesus. He didn't go back to Jesus as a baby. He actually went back further than the other Gospels did. He didn't go back to his genealogy to trace that he was the son of David. He went further back than that. He went all the way to the beginning. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And John says, in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God at the creation. And the Word was God. He was deity. The word, that we translate as word, in the Greek was logos. L-O-G-O-S, not Legos. Logos. In Greek philosophy, logos was the rational principle that gave meaning or order to the universe. That made a lot of sense to you, didn't it? Think of it this way. It's what the Force in Star Wars was modeled after. It's the thing that brings everything together. It's the thing that makes purpose and gives meaning to the universe. It was a bridge between a transcendent God and the material universe. How does a God that we can't see or imagine relate to a universe that he created? Well, the Word, or the Logos, is that bridge between the two. So Jesus revealed what was going on in the mind of God. Jesus is the bridge between us and God. You want to know what God's thinking? See what Jesus what Jesus taught. And now you know what God was thinking and teaching. In Jesus, God didn't just reveal his will to us. God didn't just teach us his laws. He revealed himself. If the Word really was what we think of as the Word, it would have been just an intellectual pursuit. And our contact with God would only be intellectual. But the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. People rubbed shoulders with him. People got to see him face to face and talk to him and ask him questions. So now God is personal. The Word is not an idea in our heads. The Word is a person communicating with us. God talking to us. God relating with us. God knew what it's like to be us. It's like the story of 5-year-old Johnny playing with his 2-year-old brother. His mom hears this curling streak, comes running in and goes, "What happened?" And Johnny says, "He pulled my hair." And mom goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry, honey. He doesn't know what that feels like." So she goes back into the other room. Here's another curling streak, this time for the younger brother. "Johnny, what happened?" "Well, you said you didn't know what it felt like to have your hair pulled, so now he does." God became flesh so that God would know what it's like to be human. You've had those prayers. You said, "God, you don't know what it's like. You don't know what it's like to go through what I'm going through, the hurts that I'm hurting, the feelings that I'm feeling." But the Word became flesh so he could. He does know what it's like and how it feels. For 33 years, God walked on earth. Everything that you and I experience, everything that you and I feel, he experienced and felt. The Bible tells us he got thirsty. He got tired. He laughed. He cried. And he knows what you're going through because he's gone through it. He knows what it was like to be lonely and rejected. At a time when he most needed companionship, they were about to arrest him and kill him, his friends ran away. He knew what it was like to be unappreciated. He healed a man of demons. And the neighbors of the man said, "Go away from us." "Well, you like the demons? How unappreciative." He taught the truth. And the teachers rejected him. The Pharisees, the scribes, the leaders of the people called him a blasphemer. Said he was full of demons. He knew what it was like to be misunderstood. He knew what it was like to be ridiculed and beaten. He knew what it was like to face death. He knew what it was like to stand at the graveside of a friend. We don't hear anything about Joseph after age 12. And so, I don't know if it's true or not, but a lot of scholars assume Joseph probably died somewhere along the line. And if that's true, then John knew what it was like to bury a father figure, a parent. He knew what it was like to grow up without a dad. He knew what it was like to miss someone. Because he felt the way you and I would feel. So John is all about Jesus, deity, God, becoming flesh, so that he can know what you and I are going through, so that he can relate to us. And so that he can tell us about God. So that you and I would believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God. One moment, the Word is infinite, immortal, limitless. And the next, he's flesh and bones like you and I. So that we can believe that he was God's Son, so that you and I can have eternal life in heaven. Well, that's the purpose of John. And we're going to go through it, and I hope by the time we're done, if you don't believe already, you believe. And if you do believe already, you'll be able to explain to others. You'll believe it so deeply that it'll just flow out of you the way you act. And so we're going to go through John, and it's going to take us at least 8 months. But it'll be fun, because there's a lot of good stuff in John. We're going to pray together. And then I also got to share with you, so let's pray together. Father, I thank you so much for this gospel. I thank you for John taking the time to write all this, to tell us about the Jesus he knew, but to explain to us that the Jesus he knew was actually Son Son to come and be one of us so that you can experience everything that we experience. So when we're hurting, and when we're frustrated, and when we're mad at the world, and we're not sure we can trust you, help us to understand that you understand us. Because you walked in our shoes. You've been one of us. Help us begin to trust you. That you know the things we're going through. That you know the thoughts we're thinking. You know the hurts we're hurting. You know the grief that we feel. You know the joys that we have. And you know the hope that we need. So would you speak to us through this study and allow us to grow in our faith and knowledge of Jesus Christ as your Son. And that through him we can know life eternal. Praise Christ's name.